What if your next level feels so far to reach because you are thinking about it in a very linear way? Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about the difference between linear thinking and quantum thinking so that you can use your energy so much more efficiently to achieve your next level in a much more realistic way. So, if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Elika. I'm an energy strategist and a trusted advisor for purpose-driven leaders who want to create an impact in the world. And you don't want your energy to be the thing that is limiting the possibilities for you to do so. So if you like the sound of that and anything related to how you could use your energy efficiently, then what are you waiting for? Subscribe and give this a like. And so we'll go straight into the video to give you the insights on this particular area today. So I love talking about this because it's become a way of living for me. And the challenge actually is always this with something that becomes so ingrained in you is that you sometimes forget how you used to think and how you used to be. And yet I get into conversations all the time and I realize when I'm with others that they're just they're just going the hard way. And this is one of those, as is everything to do with mindset, that can shift your reality by shifting the way that you perceive things. So let's start off with linear thinking. So linear thinking for me really comes from how science evolved. So science evolved a lot from Newtonian theory. And Newton really looked at things in a very linear way. So his basic principle laid on the effects of cause and effect. So something happens and then the next thing happens as a result of that. And so if you think about that, everything that we have in terms that provides structure for us in our life is built on that linear thinking. The education system is a really good example. We think about when you go into the education system, it goes by year one, then year two, year three, and then year four. Think about how so many people plan their whole life. They also do the same, right? Nursery, then school, primary school, then high school, then college, then university, then get a good job, then get married. So can you see that so many of us have automated our lives into a linear way of being? But what if there is another way of being? And what if that way of being allows us to get the things that we truly desire in a way that feels so much more aligned to how our energy is designed? And that's why I love quantum thinking. Now, Einstein really is, I find, the most evolved master around his principles that feel really quantum. And essentially, what this means is that there is an infinite amount of possibilities that are available to us. And in quantum physics, we are seeing that actually things don't always happen in a linear way. There is a way that two things can be connected, and they're not connected because A means B or cause means effect. And so we see this in things like how, and this is a really beautiful study in quantum physics where we actually see that two things that had some form of energetic connection previously could be so distant from each other and they could be affected by what each other is experiencing or what each other are thinking about. And you know this because you've all had that experience where you're thinking about someone and they call you or you bump into them or they show up in some way, shape, or form. You receive a message from them. And this really is a really good example of how things are not always linear in fashion. So when we tap into this, we start thinking about our lives and the next level for us in where we want to have success, wherever that is for you, your health, your relationships, your financial goals, whatever it is for you. And you start realizing that there may be an easier way to get there. And what that means is that I need to look at things slightly differently. So I love to use my energy roadmap for this. My energy reset roadmap is the 4 pillars that I use with all of our concierge clients to be able to audit every area of their life where I see energy leaks. And so they can be more efficient in achieving their next level by, let's say, removing those leaks. And then I use these 4 pillars as the guide, as the roadmap to get them through every area of their life, personally and professionally. So let's look at nutrition as the first pillar. If I look at how most people approach nutrition, they would say, let's say, I want to lose weight. And so they would say, okay, so I need to restrict the way that I'm eating, or I need to increase the amount of exercise, or I need to eat 6 days like healthy, clean, whatever the word they want to use. It's usually not the words that I describe it, but whole foods, minimally processed is how I would like to look at it. And maybe I have one day off, and some people refer to this as their cheat day. Now, when you approach it like that, then that means that you're going to go through a set period of time that takes to gradually lose that weight. But the problem with that is, and this is so true for most people, is that the discipline that requires means that you usually have moments where there's self-sabotage. So events happen, birthdays happen, great dinners happen, and you find it hard then to continue. So what happens is you you sabotage, let's say in 1 week, by going over and having 2 or 3 cheat days. And then that ultimate goal has changed. It takes longer. And so the goalpost keeps on moving because every single time you go in this linear fashion, the end result doesn't work. Whereas when I look at, okay, let's say how I want to lose weight, I look at where have I got the leaks that actually gain weight in my life. So I will look at, for example, my sleep is for me something that if I'm not consistent in my sleep, then I know that it's much harder for me to lose weight because my cortisol, which is my stress hormone, is also going to be higher if I don't have good sleep. But then I go deeper and I go, but what is stopping me from having good sleep? And typically for me, because I love getting good sleep, it's usually nights out where I've eaten late and then I just can't go straight to sleep because I know I just cannot digest my food that late. So I just generally build my calendar around that. I build my calendar around it so that my lifestyle allows for early dinners, big lunches, making lunch the go-to occasion when I meet people versus dinner. These sorts of kind of evening activities that are more social, those are the ones for me that would put pressure on me to eat later. So I just generally don't have that as my go-to set point. And then I look at other areas like my movement. Now, I know for me that my body responds really well when I'm doing resistance training regularly. And that for me is 3 times a week. But also with resistance training, because I have done it for longer than I can remember, over 20 years, I definitely know that I can fall into automation of my resistance training where I'm not actually monitoring my progress. So I'm not going heavier, I'm not creating more resistance. And especially because a lot of my resistance training when I travel a lot is body weight. So I really have to monitor, am I comfortable? And if I am comfortable, I have to change it up. I have to increase the weight or increase the time under pressure for my muscles. So I have to mix it up. So another area that I see also for kind of my weight loss is where my hormones are going to be imbalanced. And that for me predominantly is cortisol. I have a nervous system that loves to be in fight or flight. It loves to look for stress. And so my morning ritual for me of just taking my time in the mornings and setting myself up for the day has been an area where I feel like I can create an environment of peace within inside of me and carry that peace through the day. And there's various things that I do in the morning that help that, like my breath work practice. I just love doing 4-7-8, just simple breath work. I also love just following a Wim Hof method that he does. It's just a 1 minute short, deep breathing into the stomach. I know another just morning thing for me is just the music that I listen to or the podcast that I listen to that really just light up my soul. They just give me inspiration. So these are all things that I do just to set me into the right tone. And most importantly, when I exercise in the morning, I love to have some time in nature. So I love to either exercise outside if it's possible to do so, or long morning walks. I just love that. So these are things that then create this habit that allows me to lose weight. And by that means that if you notice, it's not one thing. And because it's not one thing, I can achieve that goal a lot quicker because I'm not relying on just, for example, my nutrition. And then if I fail at eating clean for 1 or 2 days, then I'm really having to put back that goal in terms of time. Let's look at the second pillar. So the second pillar that I would look at is your purpose. So the second pillar in my energy reset is movement. But I want to look at purpose because I think when it comes to the work that we do, this is such a big impact on all the other areas of our life. So what happens a lot is career progression. So a lot of us have been taught that career progression comes from how we educate ourselves. So for example, we have to get certain grades, we have to do for certain universal education, we have to work in a company for a certain period of time before we get promoted, but that's not true. So that's very linear thinking. In quantum thinking, you would say, who do I need to know, for example? So let's say if I wanted career progression, rather than looking at my company to provide those career progression through me, through how I work and my objectives of that company, I could say, I'm ready for career progression. How do I show up in a different way in my company that makes me invaluable? But equally, how do I also look at who else is out there in my environment that sees my value and is willing to pay more for my value? So I feel so many people limit themselves to the company that they're within, or that even if it's your own business, how do you scale your own growth? Is it by how much activity you do, or is it restructuring how your business is run? So for example, in the coaching business, a lot of people are looking at, okay, how many more clients do I take on? But they could look at, how do I create a different program that's worth more value for my clients and charge higher and take fewer clients? So do you see that in this scenario, quantum thinking gets you to ask a completely different question, where linear thinking almost follows a structure that already exists, that most people are following, but most people are not happy. Most people are not getting quantum leaps in every area of their life. Most people are not feeling success. Most people are not feeling joy most of the time and inner peace. Most people are not having harmony in all areas of their life. So you don't really want to follow that linear way of progressing in your career if that only gives you the results that everybody else is getting, that it's not the result that you want. And I think I want to give you one more example, and I think the best example is definitely relationships. So relationships are so important to us as social beings, not just for emotional connection and intimacy, but also for career progression, right? So the people that you connect with can allow you to quantum leap in your career progression, in your financial goals, in your monetary desires. And so let's look at linear thinking in relationships. So linear thinking in relationships could be, for example, how let's say I need to work my way up my career path so that I am the boss. And when I'm the boss, I then can have responsibility for the decisions that are made in either the company that I work for, or I need to own a business so that I can make decisions every day. Well, another way of looking at that from a quantum way would be, who do I need to know in order to get that result? So for example, as my own business, I could say, yeah, I'm the boss, I make all the decisions, but all the decisions that I make are still limited by the resources that I have. So I would much rather go, who do I need to connect with in my community that could leapfrog? For example, they could bring me more clients, they could give me more visibility, they could pay me more. These are the questions that I ask myself so that I can leapfrog the whole process of relationships. I also know that my relationships give me energy. So if I think about, okay, putting myself in environments where I don't feel like I fit in, then that means that I could know a lot of people. I could spend a lot of time with a lot of people. But again, those relationships are not going to allow me to feel fulfilled. They're not going to allow me to feel energized. They're not going to light up my mind, my soul. So again, the environment would shape those relationships by thinking linear, as opposed to, okay, I need to be going to how many networking meetings a week, or I need to go to, and if I was at school or college or going back into education, I need to educate myself so that I'm around educated people. I don't think that way, you know. And I also see this in intimate relationships. It's like, what do I need to do to meet this right partner? Well, in the dating world, you can look at it from the lens of, how do I meet this type of person? A person, for example, if I'm a woman, I might think I want a guy that's a certain height, or I want a guy with a certain wealth, or I want a guy that looks a certain way, fitness or athletic. But I would ask myself, how do I attract that type of person to me? And so that means if I want those things, for example, well, a guy that has a certain amount of wealth has proven in society that he has a certain level of status that can provide value to others. So then I ask myself, how do I provide value to others? How do I become more value? I look at what am I giving to others in my community, and I start being someone that gives more value to others. I might say, okay, if I want a guy that's fit and in great shape, I might go, okay, how do I make sure that my body is in great shape? If I want a guy that, let's say, is funny, or, you know, let's say good sense of humor, I ask myself, how much am I receptive to people that make jokes? Like, how much do I find myself laughing at other people? And so these are ways that we can really start shifting in some of my core pillars. How do we really get ourselves to expand our mind by thinking in a more quantum way than in a linear way? And I want to end the kind of embodiment of this for you by just giving you how this has shown up for me in my life. So one way I can definitely see is that, from education wise, I had two forms of education early on. I had the very local school education, and I had boarding school very early on. And one of the things that I reflected on is, and I'm not saying that I fully benefit from this because I definitely didn't see it at the time, but boarding school education gave me access to a different type of person, a person that had resources. Let's say their family could afford for them to be in a higher education. That gave me access to people that had proven success in more areas of their life. And so this is very different to, let's say, when I went into an education system in a local environment that was very working class. And the thought process of people were to follow really what their parents done, which was very much a culture of working really hard and relying on the government to provide for them, instead of, let's say, more entrepreneurial or self-made kind of wealth creation. So I noticed that when I unfortunately moved out of the private education and had exposure to working class education, I started to learn very early on that I just wanted a lot more. And, you know, there's this phrase in Australia, they call it tall poppy syndrome. I understand as a child that a lot of people were looking at me and commenting that I needed to settle a little bit, settle in terms of my expectations. And so I think that was one of the main reasons why I knew I had to live abroad. And it's funny because obviously now I look back and it's easy to see, but my mother got a scholarship and went to study abroad. And so it was always in my DNA to see that overseas could provide me that quantum leap. And so when I moved overseas, I immediately got paid so much more for the same job. But not only that, when I moved from the UK to Singapore, I had a standard of living which I dreamed of every year in the UK, for 2 weeks a year. So imagine my thinking. My thinking in the UK was, you have two, if you're lucky, 3 holidays a year, and you get to bathe in sunshine, have so much joy, have evenings out on the terrace. Whereas when I moved to Singapore, I got that immediately. I got every day to live in my summer dresses. I got every day to feel the sun on my bare skin. I got every day to live a life that was more outdoors than indoors. and I got paid more to do so. So that one shift of looking at overseas for the opportunity instead of in my environment, which came from a young age of realizing that I don't have the same expectations as other people, that leapfrogged my career, my aspirations, and the way that I live today. You know, today I'm looking at a life where I'm probably going to live in about minimum 3 different countries within a year. You know, we're looking at Dubai as a base. We also have a home in Sicily, and we're also looking at a third home. And, you know, I'm currently in Bali, and I'm looking at Bali. We're also looking at South Africa. This would not have been possible had I not taken that step and moved overseas, because I felt like the opportunities could come from me living abroad. The other example I definitely have is obviously my relationship with Matt, and how we got married. And, you know, had I not had that first marriage and that relationship that I started at a young age, at 17, and coming out of that after 18 years and gone, I'm going to commit myself now to knowing myself so deeply, all parts of myself, all the shadow parts of myself, doing deep, deep inner work to uncover the patterns and behaviors that keep me in a pattern of self-sabotage and not having the most expansive version of the relationship that I want. If I hadn't committed myself to that process, instead of just gone, okay, that relationship failed, now I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life, or maybe I would have gone, just let me just jump into the next relationship. No, I said, I need to understand me. And I also committed to understanding me through others. So that meant dating, but not to secure the next relationship, but dating as a mirror, so that I could see how these people in my life would be teachers for me and showing me the parts of me that weren't showing up as my best self. And I committed that myself for that. And that took 5 years process. But then when I met Matt, I immediately felt, okay, oh my God, the vision that he has of his life is the same vision that I have for my life. We want to travel, we want to have adventure, we want to create impact in the world. We care so deeply about others. We are sensitive souls. And then it led me to knowing that, okay, when you are meeting someone based on values, that you can move a lot quicker, because you can just have conversations immediately on those deep things, the things that cause issues in other people's relationships so quickly, like about how you're going to manage your finances, like questions about children, having children, questions around your work and how you're going to live your day-to-day life, questions around your sex life. These are difficult questions, but when you have committed to yourself in the way that I did, you know yourself so deeply that you know that you can have those conversations with another person and know immediately whether you're going to be able to make it work. And I think we were able to do that so quickly that we could commit to that next stage of relationship, get engaged within 3 months, and get married within 9 months, because we knew that not that there wasn't going to be work to do in the relationship, not that there might not be challenging times, but that the foundation that we wanted, we were willing to commit to each other because we believed that foundation was very strong that we were starting with. So these are just to give you examples of how I have embraced quantum thinking, because I feel like in every area of my life, there's always going to be my next level. And in my next level, I need to take a step back and I need to go, this is how society pushes me through that. This is how society wants me to move through my career. This is how society wants me to build my wealth. This is how society wants me to manage my health, right? And I want to ask better questions of me that get me to that next level quicker, more efficiently, with more ease and more flow. So I want to build wealth through looking at things that are not so mainstream, like crypto, instead of putting my money in a bank or just, let's say, buying a property. I want to build my health by looking at longevity, which is building a lifestyle so that the lifestyle is the architecture that creates health, rather than having to diet, over-exercise, stress myself out with gym memberships and classes that I've got to go to and all these restrictions that I put on. I want to build a nurturing, loving, divine union, and that our values as individuals and the people that we are come together and support other people through our eco. I think I've talked about you. I may have spoken about that before, but Matt and I have our relationship values. And actually, I think I wrote about that on my newsletter, because I tend to be a lot more, my intimate stuff I share in my newsletter. But when we create these relationship values, it's because we thought, how do we create a relationship that our relationship then has such a beautiful impact on others. And so I had to ask myself these different questions, because most people have a marriage or a relationship that is just companionship for the sake of being in a relationship. That is most people, not because you truly desire to be with this person and create and share life in the highest expression that you can with this person. And I think that quantum thinking it's going to be an essential way of feeling free as a human to live the best life that you can possibly have, that starts inside being at peace. And that means that the outside frequency that you emit, the energy that touches others, is an expression of that. It's an expression of you having those deep questions that expand your possibilities and therefore expand what's available to you and available to others. So I would love to hear what you think about that. I want to leave you first with one powerful exercise to start you thinking quantum thinking. I want you to take my 4 pillars of my energy reset framework, and if you haven't if you're new to my framework, I would really recommend you look through my videos and look at how I do my energy audit, which is using the energy reset framework. There's definitely a video on that. So look for energy audit or energy reset framework. It's also on my website, my framework. And the 4 pillars of my framework is nutrition, movement, purpose and relationships, and the mind and self-care, which covers nervous system mastery. And I would ask you to ask yourself a quantum question in each of those areas. So I've given you really good examples of how quantum thinking is. So instead of going, with nutrition, what diet do I need to be on? Ask yourself, what is it that's affecting me if my goal is to lose weight? And look at that as opposed to following a diet specifically. So ask that in each of these questions. Get a question to ask yourself in each of these areas. Quantum thinking is big, expansive thinking in each area of your life. So I would love for you to use my framework as a way to audit yourself with this quantum lens and see how quickly you can shape now your own direction and how you move forward to your next level. I would love to hear how you get on with this. Leave me some comments below with how you get on, with what comes up for you. If you have any questions based on what I've shared, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. And if you think somebody else is very linear in how they think and they will really benefit from this video, share it with them. I do always say that the best way to get access to the insights that I share around human energy and really how energy is your most valuable currency is on my newsletter. So you'll see details of that in the description, because I can share with you my life and how I'm living it, how I audit my life, the experience that I have of doing this with my clients for over a decade now. And I just feel like I'm a little bit more vulnerable in my newsletter because it's the closest connection to me. So I hope that you sign up for that as well, to really get yourself really empowered in this area of achieving harmony in all areas of your life, and so that you can have success, not just in one area, but in every area. So I really enjoyed sharing this with you, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.